Introduce myself. I'm Paige Levrin, and I'll be your host tonight. I'm representing Visalia Unified's College and Career Readiness. Ignite Your Curiosity will be a monthly series of webinars for students and parents to hear from a variety of industry leaders. Each month, a new industry-themed panel will help you explore different career possibilities with your child. This month's theme is Law and Justice, and we have a student from Redwood High School Law and Justice Academy joining us, Crystal Haragi, and she will be cross-examining our panelists tonight. But before we get started with that, I just want you to go ahead and take care of a little housekeeping information. We are going to have all of our audience on mute, and we would like you to utilize the Q&A feature if you have questions. So that's at the bottom of your screen. You can put your questions in that area. Tonight's webinar is being recorded, and tomorrow we will post it to our website. So if you'd like to take a picture of the screen currently or a screenshot so that you know exactly where to find our website, that'll make it easier for you. For any of our seniors out there, also know that on our website, we have all kinds of information to help you through your application season with your college applications and your financial aid on that. Also on the website, we have our newsletter. So keep watching for events like this and register ahead of time to make sure that you don't miss out. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started, and I'm going to introduce Crystal Haragi, and she's going to get us started. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Crystal Haragi, and I'm a senior in the Academy of Law and Justice at Redwood High School. I will be your host this evening, and we will start out with each of our presenters introducing themselves along with telling you what they do in the field of law and justice. To begin our introductions, we have Mr. Chris Gomez, the best mock trial coach.
Hi, I'm Chris Gomez. I am a private attorney here in Visalia. I'm also a Redwood alumni, and I have been coaching the Redwood mock trial team for 16 years now. I am in a law firm with two partners. I currently do a split of juvenile delinquency cases. I defend juveniles as a conflict attorney when the public defender can't do it, so I'm appointed by the county. And in my other half of my practice, I do family law. So.
Okay, let's go ahead and have our next participant introduce himself. Mr. Harris, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Oh, hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Curtis Harris. I'm from Long Beach, California, but I'm currently based out of Washington, D.C. I work in civil rights law. Just a few short weeks ago, I finished up a one-year fellowship with the ACLU National Prison Project. And next month, I'm going to start a two-year fellowship with the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division Special Litigation Team. And in my area of law, both of those job experiences are very similar. At the ACLU, I worked in settlement monitoring, where basically the ACLU Prison Project, they would produce a lawsuit against a prison system that we believe is engaging in constitutional violations against the people incarcerated there. And sometimes the ACLU and that prison system will enter into a contract or a settlement where the prison system will agree to make a series of changes to their policies. And after that, there's a period that may last as many as decades, where the ACLU will visit the prison systems, check in to see if those settlements or contracts are being followed. And so I did that most of the time, and I worked on a lawsuit in Arizona and a lawsuit in the Virgin Islands. And then halfway through my experience, we started doing a lot of work related to COVID, where we engaged in a bunch of lawsuits against immigration detention centers all over the country. But I can get into that later. Sorry.
Next, can we have Miss Bailey Leverin introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Bailey. I'm also a Redwood alumni, and about 10 years ago, Chris was my mock trial coach at Redwood. I now live in Boston. I am a second-year attorney at Jones Day, which is an international law firm. I focus primarily on cybersecurity, data privacy, and data breach notification. So when you get an email from a company saying that, oh no, your email and password's been compromised, you should change your password, that probably was an email drafted by someone doing my job. I also do a lot of pro bono work. I specifically work on asylum cases. I used to work in Texas detention centers when I had the time. And I now do pro bono work with migrants who have been forced to remain in Mexico under the new immigration policies and are seeking asylum in the United States.
And now our last presenter from the FBI, may you please introduce yourself?
I'm an FBI agent in Fresno right now. My background is that I was an attorney in Chicago before I became an agent about 12 years ago. And my first office was upstate New York, and then I came here to Fresno from there. I work mostly white-collar crime, specifically healthcare fraud. Before coming to Fresno, when I was working in upstate New York, I worked mostly terrorism cases. It's a real pleasure for me to be here, so thanks for having me.
So for our panel, Crystal is going to be our MC tonight. She has a lot of great questions for you, and then I will be piping in as we have questions come across on the Q&A. So Crystal, are you ready to cross-examine?
Okay, now that we know everyone, we're going to start with some questions. The first question is, how do you become a lawyer, and what does a lawyer do as a profession?
Not all at once, please.
Well, you start by going to law school. In the United States, to get a law degree, you first need to get an undergrad degree. So your first step is going to be college. Major, it doesn't really matter. I know a lot of people who focus on doing criminal justice majors or political science majors. And if that's something that's really interesting to you, then that's great. But it is by no means necessary to do one of those majors to get a law degree afterwards. I was an English literature major. I have plenty of friends who are lawyers who did, I think history is another popular major. If you're interested in the sciences, I really encourage you to go get a major in whatever scientific field you're interested in, because it opens up whole new areas of law to you to be able to practice in. And then after you get your undergrad degree, you'll need to go to law school, which takes 3 years. And then from there, once you graduate law school, you take the bar exam for your state. And then once you pass the bar exam and you are licensed, you can practice law.
Okay, our next question is, what law schools did you attend, and did it make a difference what school you received your degree from?
I think it kind of broke up, so let's go ahead and repeat that. It says, what law schools did you attend, and does it make a difference what law school you receive your degree? Chris, do you want to?
Okay, well, I graduated from Santa Clara University School of Law up in Santa Clara. It's a good school. Before that, I graduated from Redwood. I went to Berkeley for 2 years. I flunked out. I enlisted in the Marine Corps for 5 years. And after I got out of the Marine Corps, I moved back to the Bay Area. I went back to school. I went to De Anza Junior College for a year to get my grades up. And then I went to San Jose State for 2 years. I got my bachelor's degree in political science because that was, my goal was to go to law school. And then I went to Santa Clara. I was in the night program and I did it for 4 years. So, yeah, it's an ABA accredited school in California. So you can understand, California is one of the few states that actually doesn't require you to graduate from an American Bar Association accredited schools. It allows you to, it has different levels of accreditation. And I know attorneys that actually went to law school online and then were able to take the bar, but you all take the same bar exam. I see a question is how hard is it? It was pretty hard. It used to be 3 days in California a couple of years ago. They switched it to 2 days. It's writing and then multiple choice. You just got to be in the right headspace to pass it. So if anyone wants to add anything.
Yeah, I just want to add that I heard one of the questions being, is it important which law school that you graduate from? I think that a lot of times when you're applying to law schools, that can be an incredibly stressful decision unto itself. Just how highly ranked is the law school? Is it a big enough name to where I feel like I'll be taken care of with a degree from this place? And I think that, there are people who may subscribe to that hype. There's a popularly recognized ranking system on US News, but I think that one of the things that you have to consider, and this is an incredibly personal decision, is that there are so many other elements that make for a great law school experience. And then further after that, I mean, I'm only a second-year attorney, but I believe make for a great law school, law practice, who are the faculty at the law school, is this, have you found from current law students at a particular school that, they've been able to form tight-knit communities? How large or small are the classroom sizes? What is the location? What's the weather like there? All these things are going to make for, how much you're going to enjoy your law school experience. And, the more you enjoy your law school experience, I feel the more that you're going to perform and the more you're going to be able to sell yourself as an asset to wherever you want to work. So, yeah.
I went to school at UCLA for law school. Before that, I did my undergrad at UC Santa Barbara. I think it's definitely an important consideration which law school you go to. Part of that is like what Chris was saying with the accreditation. California, if you go to an unaccredited school, you can still take the bar and be licensed in California. You also have to take what's called the baby bar after your first year. But if you ever think you might want to practice outside of state, you might want to go to an accredited law school. I thought I was going to stay in California my whole life. And by the end of my first year, had realized that I was actually going to be moving to Massachusetts. And that wasn't something I expected when I first went to law school. So because I went to a school that was accredited, I could take my degree and go to Massachusetts and take the Massachusetts bar. I think Curtis's points are so important. You want to think about the quality of education you're getting, especially because law school is a huge investment. And think about your ultimate goals. Do you want to be a clerk for a Supreme Court justice? Do you want to maybe one day be on the Supreme Court? Then you should be trying to go to one of the best top 15 schools in the country. Do you want to work as a prosecutor or a public defender in your hometown? Super great, but which school you go to then doesn't matter as much. And I would focus on going somewhere where you can get a big scholarship or get a break on the tuition so that you're not going to debt over that. Something to consider in regards to the bar exam is that someone asked how hard it was. It depends on the state. There's different bar exams for different states. I took Massachusetts first, and when I took Massachusetts, 80% of people who took it passed. And then I came and I took California. When I took the California bar, only 26% of the people passed. That's a pretty big differential. And I think the pass rate shows you maybe how difficult a state bar is. That said, I went to UCLA, and the pass rate for UCLA students on the California bar was 80%. So you can look at the school that you're interested in and see how well those students perform on the bar exam. And that gives you kind of a metric to see how good of an education you're getting or how well prepared that school is going to leave you for taking the bar exam and for your future.
Question for our lawyers is for Mr. Gomez. Did you know in high school that you
You cut out at the end there, Crystal. Did I know in high school what?
You're on mute.
My question was, did you know in high school?
You're having, we're having all kinds of audio issues today.
Can you hear me?
Did you know in high school, Chris, that you wanted to be a lawyer, and what path led you to law school? You're on mute, Chris.
When I was in high school, I was into math and science. And so being a math and science guy, I gravitated toward engineering because that seemed like a good thing to do. I found that I wouldn't say it was the biggest mistake of my life, but it was a mistake. So I got into Berkeley and I majored in chemical engineering for 2 years, and I did horrible because I hated it. Because I was on scholarship with the Marines, I just said opted out, and I went into the Marines, and in the Marines, I was a Russian linguist. So, and I got to live in Hawaii for 3 years. So during that time, when I was studying Russian in Monterey, I started dating my wife, when I was home, she was a senior at Redwood, and I started dating her, and her father was a judge. And so by hanging around with them, I got interested in law and realized I'm a natural for law. Because when I came back and as a lawyer to Visalia, whenever I told anybody that knew me that I was a lawyer, they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So, and I think it was really a matter of just not being exposed to anybody, because once I got to know my father-in-law and I met other lawyers, and then we just kind of went with it. And, you know, I knew from that moment, from the time that I got engaged with my wife, 31 years ago, that I wanted to be a lawyer. It just took me a little while to get there, to get through school and rehabilitate. And I've actually been practicing law now for 19 years. So I started law school in '97, before just about any of you were born. And, you know, and graduated in 2001, and that's when I moved back here. So
let's go to Alexia, Crystal, and address your question with her again.
Okay, hopefully my audio works.
This is better. Yes, it sounds good.
Alexia, how does one join the FBI, and do you have a specific college degree?
My sound is a little better. Can you hear me better now? Okay, phew. So it depends a little bit on what kind of position you're applying for with the FBI. We have all kinds of different positions here. So not just the special agent position, we also have anything from forensic accountants to more secretarial type positions. We have intelligence analysts and people in the laboratory. So all of those positions have different requirements, but specifically with the special agent position, there is not a specific college degree that you have to have, although you do have to have a college degree. I think in general, the FBI wants its agent population to reflect all the different types of people there are in the country. So we want people who come from a more white collar background. We want people who come from, you know, police and military and other types of jobs too. So if you were to ask everybody on my squad, you would hear all kinds of different backgrounds. I think some people think that you need to have a criminal justice degree to work in law enforcement or in the FBI. And I would actually say that sometimes the FBI prefers to have people who might be able to bring a different kind of skill to the Bureau. For instance, having an accounting degree can be really helpful if you work in white collar crime, or having a cyber background is amazing if you're going to be a cyber agent. So whatever you're passionate about, whatever you're good at, whatever your interests are, I would say that's probably the best college degree to get. It really doesn't matter what it is. I think regardless, if you can bring something special to the Bureau.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Harris, what does it mean to be a litigation fellow for the ACLU, and how does that differ
Crystal, you're having some
From
microphone
your
problems
current
again.
job with the department.
So let me repeat the question real quick. On your, yeah, we're having some technical difficulties, no problem. Mr. Harris, what does it mean to be a litigation fellow for the ACLU? And how does that differ from your current job with Department of Justice Civil Rights Division?
Yeah, sure. So short answer, they're actually very similar. So a litigation fellow, so right out of law school, I had a 1-year fellowship. So that's a short-term employment. It can be, it's usually 1 to 2 years with an organization. And it's funded through, either private donors, such as Skadden or Equal Justice Works. I was fortunate to have my fellowship, so what I was paid for the past year mostly through UCLA Law, and the remainder through the ACLU. So for all intents and purposes, my job was exactly the same as a staff attorney. I was, like participating in like job responsibilities, like when it came to just like, handling like all the case management and engaging in all the strategy meetings and whatnot. So for all intents and purposes, you're basically just a staff attorney, but just on a short-term basis with that organization. And with the DOJ, it's going to be something very similar. It's a 2-year fellowship through their honors program. And yeah, I'm going to be a litigator, a staff attorney with their special litigation team, specifically with prison law and police practices. So the subject matter is actually extremely similar to what I was just doing with ACLU. So just lots of continuity.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to go back to Alexia. What is your most exciting case with the FBI?
That's a hard one. Honestly, I think the most exciting cases are the ones that are the most challenging. So I think white collar crime can be very difficult because we have to prove that the person who committed the crime intended to commit it, and they're not just a bad doctor or a bad business person. And so having to come up with creative ways to prove our case and put the investigation together is what makes a case really exciting. And any more than that is unfortunately stuff I probably can't talk about.
Classified?
Thank you. Now, Ms. Lovren, you work for what is considered a big law firm. What does that mean, and how does that contrast with your pro bono work with the Loretto Project?
That's a great question. So something I didn't know about before I went to law school was that there's all kind of different fields, I guess, not just in what you're doing as a lawyer, but in the size and the type of organization you're working for. So you might be doing public interest work, which is working for maybe a nonprofit or something like the ACLU, like Curtis did. Or you might be at a private firm or opening your own firm, or doing work like what Chris does. You might be working for a government job. So you might be a assistant DA or a public defender, or if you're working for the federal government, a US attorney. And then there are medium-sized firms, and then there is this tier that's called big law. So I think big law is typically what people think about when they think about like, oh, going and being a lawyer and like the big lawyer in movies. They are very, very large firms. My firm is, I believe, the largest in the United States, but we have an international presence. So we have 5 offices in California, but we also have offices in France, Spain, England, the Middle East, China, the list goes on. So it's a huge amount of lawyers, which on one hand is really nice because you get to develop relationships with people all over the world. I regularly work with an attorney in Belgium. The time difference is killer when we're trying to schedule calls, but it's really great to work with someone who an international community doing the same kind of work that I'm doing. And it really helps because when I'm doing cybersecurity, a lot of times now due to the internet, companies have customers all over the world, not just the United States. And so when something happens in terms of cybersecurity, those other countries' laws apply. So I need to know what the EU's cybersecurity laws are. I need to know what Ireland's cybersecurity laws are. And it helps to have a team of lawyers who are international, who work all over the world and are placed all over the world, because I need that resource. I can't know it all by myself. And that's a really hard burden to try to shoulder. The downside is, like, you do become more of a number. It is a little bit more cutthroat. The pressure is intense. You are expected to work a certain amount of hours a year. And while the pay is very nice, there is really no such thing as a work-life balance. So I mostly work for large corporations. When individuals hire us, they are usually very high-powered individuals. So presidential candidates, for example, have hired our firm to do election law for them. Entire cities, entire states have hired our firm to do work for them. In contrast, I do pro bono work, which is where I really very much am working with a single individual. So, for example, I had a asylum case with a mother and her young son who were fleeing from Cuba, who were political asylees who had, spoken out against their current government and faced retaliation from the government as a result. And they fled to the United States. They were made to wait for over a year in Mexico. And then we were able to represent them at their hearing from an immigration judge and help my client kind of tell her story. And she and her son were granted asylum and are now happily living in the United States where they're safe. And that's I think, very rewarding work, very difficult work at times, but incredibly rewarding because it's people who desperately need the assistance, and without people doing pro bono work would likely not be able to afford assistance. And it truly does usually become a life or death matter to be able to represent them. That said, I'm able to do that work through my firm. So because we are a large firm, because we have so many resources, we have been able to establish large pro bono projects like the Laredo Project, which is based in Laredo, Texas, which is where most of the immigration court hearings happen, and where there are a lot of detention centers. So it was originally established so that we could go into detention centers and help people who are being detained because they have otherwise no right to a lawyer, no right to call a lawyer and just get a lawyer like you would if you were a U.S. citizen in a normal jail. And that made a huge difference for a lot of people there, especially when family separation was really becoming a thing right off the bat. We were able to do a lot of good work with helping reunite families. And so just the resources that my firm has opened these doors so that I'm able to, as part of my job, basically get credit for doing these other cases, which is great for the people who need it, but also great for me because as a young associate in a big firm, I don't get to walk into a courtroom every day and get a lot of trial experience. I have to kind of work my way up that. But when it's pro bono, I get those experiences. I get to be the lead on the trial. I get to do all the work before appearing before the judge, which is, win-win.
Thank you for sharing. Now, both for you and Mr. Gomez, I would like to ask, can you tell us about your connection to Redwood Mock Trial?
Okay, I'll start then. I joined Redwood Mock Trial when I was a sophomore at Redwood and did it for the rest of my time at Redwood. I loved it. It was great. It was, I think, what introduced me to law in the first place because I don't come from a family that has lawyers. I didn't have anyone that was particularly close to me that I knew that had gone into law that I could ask a lot of questions of. And so when I did that, I had a lot of great coaches like Chris, who really kind of taught me how to think like a lawyer and practice those skills. And it felt very natural. I think when I was in high school, I thought I was going to go to college for architecture. And then I changed my mind. I went to college for literature. And then while in college, I was like, well, law is really interesting. And I enjoy doing all these like law related extracurriculars, but I'm focusing on creative writing. I'm writing screenplays. I'm going to go to LA and be a screenwriter. And it took me about 3 months out of college working as a barista to be like, you know what? Law school's for me. But I definitely credit mock trial with giving me that kind of start. I see a question in the chat. What is Redwood Mock Trial? I think all of the high schools have a mock trial team. Yes, all the high schools have a mock trial team. Mock trial is what it literally sounds like, a mock trial, a pretend trial. You get a case packet where you have statements from 4 witnesses. You have maybe some exhibits, and then you break up into teams. Usually a couple students play the witnesses, a couple students play the lawyers, and you put together a trial. You put together your opening statement, your examination of your own witnesses, your cross-examination of the other side's witnesses, and your closing argument to make your case. And you actually do it at the courthouse in front of a judge who sits on the bench and presides over the whole thing, and a panel of local attorneys who score you on how well you do. And it's a really great experience to try out, you know, what lawyering is like. You get criminal trials and civil trials, so you get to kind of, you know, experience it before you even go off to college, which is great.
So my perspective of mock trial, they didn't have mock trial at Redwood when I was in high school. In fact, their first mock trial team was the next year after I graduated. I know because my best friend was on the team. When I came back to Visalia, for the first 3 years I was here, I worked at the district attorney's office, and I actually was one of the attorneys scoring for mock trial. And then when I left the district attorney's office and I went into private practice, I was voluntold. The senior partners, my boss's daughter, was on the mock trial team. And they said, okay, I volunteered all you attorneys to go coach mock trial. And I said, well, it's Redwood and I bleed Ranger blue, so I'll do it. And I loved it. And I've done it. Like I said, this is my 16th year doing it. I actually have several former mock trial students who are now attorneys. I mean, Bailey isn't the only one that I had as a mock trial student who passed the Massachusetts bar last year. I have another, Anthony Galino, who graduated, I think, in 2010, is an attorney in Massachusetts as well. So they've scattered all over. Mock trial it's challenging. You don't have to be an attorney, as Crystal knows. You can be a witness. You could be the bailiff. I mean, we had a girl who was a really good bailiff. Why? Because her mom was a bailiff in the courts. So if you're interested, mock trial at Redwood, at least, I mean, this is where the Law Academy is, mainly because the mock trial team did so well, but it's open to everybody. It's not just the Law Academy students. And I know the other high schools, I mean, I'm not sure. This year's different because we're actually going to be competing on Zoom. We still don't know how that's going to happen yet. But they have not shut down the mock trial program because of it. And state may actually be on Zoom in the spring. So we're waiting to see. Redwood has done really well, but the other schools have also had really good teams. We've always been in competition with El Diamante. So we're hoping that they have a strong team again this year as well. In fact, one of our former Redwood students went back there and coached their team for 4 years, and their last year they beat us. So it happens. Anyway, so that answers the mock trial question.
It's so funny that you bring up Anthony, your other student, because he was a senior when I was a sophomore. I think we worked together on one of the teams. And I completely forgot until you said it, but right before the pandemic shut everything down, we both got sworn into the federal bar on the same day, and he happened to see me and we connected on LinkedIn again. And I think it's just so indicative of what a small world the legal profession is. Like, you meet people who know people everywhere. And I think it's just like the fact that I come from Visalia, which is a very small town in California, and go all the way to like Boston on the other side of the country and see another person that I not only went to high school with, but also happened to also move to the same city and get sworn in, not only to the state bar, but the federal bar the same time as me. And then also when I was in high school, we had exchange students through Rotary. And one of my friends that was an exchange student, I found out happens to work for my firm in the Brussels office in Belgium, and just happened to have that connection as well. So, I mean, despite it being an international world, like, the legal profession is so small. So don't burn bridges, make friends.
Crystal, you want to ask the next question?
Alexia, I'd like to ask, what is it like to be a woman in the FBI? Yes. So Alexia, what is it like to be a woman in the FBI, and what advice would you give young women?
Oh, that's a great question. I think overall, it's definitely, we're still a minority. I would say probably a little bit less than 20% of the special agent population is female. So we definitely have challenges sometimes, but I think that makes our community even tighter. So on my squad, the other couple women and I, we always are trying to lift each other up and speak so positively of each other in front of others in order to promote each other and to be supportive of each other. And honestly, I think my male colleagues are very supportive of us too. But we all, just in general, whether it's gender or just other reasons why we're different, we all bring something different to this job. And I think that's just something I would keep stressing, is that all of us are so different. We all come from different places, different backgrounds. We've all come from different cities here in Fresno. So we all have something a little different to offer. And I think what makes us strong is that we each can bring that different perspective. And it really helps, for instance, if we go to interview somebody, sometimes I feel like the females can sometimes relate better to other females that we're interviewing. So we'll use those skills when they fit. And sometimes our male colleagues are the ones that are going to breach the door. And let's be honest, I am not going to breach the door because I don't have enough upper body strength. So, sometimes we do have a little bit of a different perspective or some different strengths to bring to the job, but it's all valuable and important.
That's great to hear. Crystal, I'm going to hop in real quick. We've got a few questions on the Q&A, and I'm going to address Mr. Harris with this one. What do you like about being a lawyer?
Oh, man. I think it really dovetails with something that Bailey said earlier about her pro bono work. It's incredibly difficult work, working in prison law and policy, but it's one of the most rewarding experiences I've ever had in my life. When you're working with people who are incarcerated, you're working with people who potentially may have committed some of the worst mistakes that you can imagine. And what this line of work really challenges you to do is to really just try to really engage with yourself and just ponder and examine why we have the constitutional rights that we have and why they're so important to protect for everybody, even those who are, politically or socially unpopular. And so there's that aspect of it. And there's also the fact, I don't know if y'all are familiar with Just Mercy by Bryan Stevenson. It's an incredible book, an incredible movie. It really guided my decision to go into prison law and policy during my first year of law school. But prisons, they're pretty horrifying places. These are places where you would hope that, you take people who have who could have made terrible mistakes, and hopefully they're better by the time that they leave those facilities. But often being within a prison system, there are just daily harms and just daily abuses that can be inflicted upon you, which more often than not makes existing problems worse. So to that, I think that having the opportunity to go into these like pretty awful spaces and then advocate for, you know, an incredibly vulnerable population. Many of these people who are incarcerated, they have serious mental illnesses, which makes it even more impossible for them to advocate for themselves when they're caught in these awful situations. But being able to go in there and advocate for people in situations that a lot of times the public doesn't even know about, it's incredibly rewarding because in a lot of ways, we may be the only people who will listen. So like there have been times where we've gone on prison tours, and even where, you know, we interview someone and at the end of the day, we can't necessarily help them on a specific issue. Just being able to talk it out with someone who is sincerely engaged and just sincerely invested in hearing everything that they have to say, it can be life-changing because that's just not something that they'll get on a regular basis. So being able to advocate for people who might otherwise not get that kind of advocacy or attention, it's truly changed my life. So yeah, I really love that about the job, difficult as it may be at times.
Very good.
And I just want to add, I mean, I've been a lawyer a long time, and what's the most rewarding thing about being a lawyer, I think, for me, that drives me is helping people. Exactly everything Curtis said in one sentence, helping people, 2 words. And you know, I don't help people in the way that he does, but everyone that comes to me, that calls my office, has a problem and they need help dealing with their problem. And so when I have my niece, my grandniece was visiting when she was like 4 or 5, and she came to my office and she asked me, what do you do? What do you do here? And I said, I help people. And then she thought I just play with the toys on my desk. But that's the most rewarding thing. And if you're not looking at it that way, if you're only looking at it for money, you're not in the right profession, because money comes at a cost, but helping people is the reward. So.
Well put, well put. We have another question in the Q&A, more regarding college costs, and also, is it better to go to a private versus a public institution? Alexia, remind me where you did your undergraduate and your law school again? Okay, so Bailey and Curtis, you did public schools both for undergrad and law school, and then Chris, you did private.
Yeah, my undergrad was all public, but I went to a private law school.
Okay.
I was actually the opposite. I went to a private university for undergrad, and then I went to law school. Yeah.
I got that mixed up. Sorry about that. Where did you do your undergrad, Mr. Harris?
I went to Hampton University in Virginia. It's a historically Black college and college university, HBCU. If you've ever heard that term before.
Can you explain that to our audience?
Yeah, so there was a time in this country's history where, you know, people who look like me, they couldn't go to any college they wanted to. So Hampton University, it was established in, I'm going to get in so much trouble for this, I believe it was 1864. Yeah, you know, for almost 100 years, you know, schools like Hampton University, you know, like Howard University, Morehouse University, that's where Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. went. You know, these universities, they were the only ones where Black students could go and matriculate into, and, you know, historically they've produced, you know, some of the most notable Black figures in history. So yeah, that's what an HBCU is. At this point, you can obviously go to any college or university you want to, but HBCUs, they still hold a pretty significant place in the country's history. So yeah, it's, I was a history major, so there's a lot of there's a lot of meaning towards going to that school.
So amongst all four of you, do you think it matters public versus private, Ivy League versus Fresno State, Stanford versus UC Santa Cruz? What would your advice to be? Is it about the name of the school for your undergrad and law school, or does it matter?
The first, I chose Santa Clara University because they chose me. I mean, because I had done so badly before, then had to bring myself up, I settled for where I could go. I happened to live in Santa Clara at the time. It was very convenient. And the school actually got better because of their high-tech law while I was there, okay? Not once I had planned when I graduated to move back to my hometown. I got a job at a law firm. Nobody cared where I went to school. Nobody cared where I graduated in my class. Nobody's asked to see my transcripts. All they cared about was, did you pass the bar? I passed the bar. Okay, you're good. And then there is a good contingency of Santa Clara University grads on our bench and among attorneys here. We don't all hang out. It's not some little club. But just to answer the question, whether it's good, and not because it was a private school. I mean, Bolt Hall, Hastings, those are better schools. They're public schools. UCLA is a better school. Public schools. I mean, in a place like Visalia, no edge. I could not have got a job at Jones Day. I couldn't even, they wouldn't even let me in the front door. So, and that's the reality of it, because I didn't go to the right school. I didn't do that. Where you go to undergrad, it can help determine where you could get into law school. One of the recent Redwood graduates was considering whether she goes full ride to Fresno State or go to Stanford. Duh, you go to Stanford. She wants to be a lawyer. You go to Stanford. That'll open up doors for you to go to almost any law school if you do well there. You could go to Stanford Law School. You go to Fresno State, you're not going to get into Stanford Law School, or at least you got an uphill battle. So where you go is important if you have specific goals and what you want to do, but getting an education is more important than that. And the cost of that, I know it asked about the cost. It's what you can do. I don't think there's any amount of money that is not worth going into debt for to get your education or to get your law degree, because that's going to open so many more doors than just saying, oh, I can't afford it, I'll just settle for what I can find.
There's one point I kind of want to make here, because you brought it up several times now, Chris. You keep saying that you had to prove yourself to get back into school. You and I graduated high school, well, after your Berkeley days.
I had to get my grades up to get into
go. Right. But what I want to clarify here is you and I graduated from high school. You were one of the top in our class. You were a very bright young man. And I remember having conversations with you, and you said it was a maturity level, late bloomer versus early bloomer, that kind of thing. Can you kind of clarify or give some comment to that to students? Because I think it's very common that students go off their freshman year to college and they experience that D or F or that struggle for the first time, and they were used to getting straight A's in high school. It went easy for them, and all of a sudden they get to college and they struggle and they think, well, maybe I'm not good enough. And that's really opposite of the truth. So could you maybe comment on that further?
First of all, I never felt like I wasn't good enough. I knew why I was failing. I realized when I went back to school after I was married and spent 5 years in the Marines that going to class and listening is sort of valuable. And it really made a difference all the way through the rest of my education. But I knew why I failed, and I blamed it, I put it on myself. But the technical reasons from the educator standpoint and from a college standpoint, I did not know why I failed until I went to Northern Arizona University last year, or orientation for parents when I moved my oldest son there. And they took all the parents into the big room and said, this is the difference between high school and college. This is what your kid needs in college. And you could go right down the list of all the things, the support that I needed. I didn't have any of it. I was on my own. They didn't have anything like this, you know, educating parents or family or whatever. And I'm like, I finally realized why I fail. You know, I didn't build a good system. Our high schools, what we're doing now is doing that. There, I mean, I knew there were people there for me to help, but they weren't there enough. And there, and you know, as I stressed about money, I stressed about a lot of things, and I just thought it would take care of itself, and it didn't. You have to do the work. You have to go to class. And I didn't, honestly, Paige, I didn't realize till last year why I failed out of college 30-something years ago. But, you know, but it doesn't mean you failed and you're done.
Right.
I went back to law school. I went to law school at 29 years old. That's older than these guys now, right? I mean, I graduated at 33. I graduated 2 months after my first child was born. You know, I already had a life. But I had a law school classmate who turned 50 while we were in law school.
Oh, wow.
He was an engineer. He's a patent lawyer now. Now he's 70. You know, I mean, there's no age that's the limit on learning, but you're right, maturity level. I'm not saying I wasn't ready to go to college. I couldn't leave this town fast enough. I majored in the wrong thing. I let other things distract me and become more important when I should have realized what was really important. That's what I emphasize more than your grades. School is the most important thing. Why would you pay somebody to let you fail? That's what I did. So
yeah, thanks, Chris. Because I think a lot of kids do hit that struggle, and they just need to know that they're not alone, and there are resources out there at the colleges, and they need to tap into those resources. Crystal, our next question of the day.
Okay, so our next question is for the lawyers. And could you tell us about the LSAT and the bar exams? Also, how should a student choose a law school?
Alexia, do you want to take this one? You said that you were also talk about your law school a little bit and your experience with the LSAT and bar exams.
Yes, is my audio working better?
It is.
Okay, good. Sorry about that, guys.
No problem.
Honestly, I have a feeling that Bailey and Curtis, having done it much more recently than I have, could probably talk about this better than I can, because I went to law school about 15 years ago, so the rules might have changed a little bit. But I think honestly earlier, Curtis and Bailey talked perfectly about the concept of choosing law schools, and we touched about it again during this conversation about private or public, that it really depends a lot, and Chris too also talked about this, it depends a lot on, you know, what your goals are. For me, in now being an FBI agent, that actually was not my goal going into law school. So I was thinking I would end up practicing. But now that I'm a FBI agent, I don't think anybody has ever even asked me what law school I go to, nor do they care, because it really doesn't matter. What matters is the process of having gotten the law degree and just the sort of academic exercise that I went through, and then also having to juggle casework when I was a lawyer. Those are the things that they were interested in, less about, you know, whether it was Ivy League or not. And in terms of LSAT, I'll let somebody else talk about that, because it's been so long, like I said.
Oh boy, the LSAT. The story of the LSAT, I mean, different intensity, but the story of the LSAT and the story of the bar exam, they're actually very similar. You have to prepare. You really have to devote yourself to that process. You know, they have prep courses. You know, they have like a million different prep courses for the LSAT, a bunch for the bar exam. And you really just have to, just in whichever way you can, you know, like there are people who study for the LSAT or study for the bar while they're working. I studied for the LSAT while I was doing my my second to last semester at Hampton. I was able to study for the bar. I wasn't working or anything during that, but in any case, just whichever time that, your circumstances allow you to devote to the studying process, whether that's studying a full-time job, making it a part-time job, you really just want to consistently just drill yourself and really just keep yourself just in the mindset of just high achievement within this very limited context. The LSAT and the bar exam, they don't define you. They're very difficult tests and they have confounded people for decades. But, you just, don't let it consume you, but really be intentional about devoting yourself to that process. Yeah.
The LSAT is so important in terms of your law school goals. I see there's a question in the chat that asks about how you get scholarships, and talking about law school scholarships, at least there's two things that law schools care about. They care about your undergrad GPA and they care about your LSAT score. And the higher you score on both of those, the better your chances of getting a scholarship. And I was a decent student in college. I think I graduated with like a 3.5 for UCLA. I think a lot of my peers had much higher GPAs than I did. But I still was able to get a half scholarship because I did very, very well on my LSAT. So there's definitely other ways into getting scholarships, but I think the number one way and the way that you can most easily control is your grades and your LSAT score. And the LSAT is not about learning laws. It's not about learning criminal justice. It's not about anything like that. It is purely logic-based reasoning. You don't have to know anything about the law to take the LSAT. It's about your reading comprehension and can you understand logical puzzles. It's difficult, but it is learnable. And it's something that you can definitely, like with work and study and effort, definitely succeed at. And a lot of people take it multiple times. So you shouldn't be afraid the first time you take it and it didn't turn out the way you wanted because you didn't study enough or you had anxiety on test day. Like, take it again. Take as many times as you need to do it, because I think depending on your goals, a scholarship could be make or break. If you're able to land a job at someplace like Jones Day, that's big law, then yeah, you're not going to have to really worry about paying back your student loans. Like, it's going to be something that you can achieve in a pretty short amount of time. But if you want to work at your, local courthouse being a DA, or if you want to start out in your own firm, like, those loans are going to be weighing on you. And if you can get a scholarship to really take that weight off, that's going to make a huge difference in your life and your career going forward.
I actually learned something today. Texas A&M Law School will allow you to be admitted for taking the GRE and not the LSAT.
A lot of schools are actually doing that now. I forgot that. Even UCLA is now switched to doing the GRE. So it started about
either or.
Yeah, it's either or. So if you just really can't master the LSAT, take the GRE. Go do something else.
It's possible that the reputation of the LSAT was turning good students away because they were scared of it, or it's a different type of test. And we all know that, I have friends from law school, we graduated in 2001, that never passed the bar. And they were good students. They graduated high in our class, failed the bar every time, and then gave up. So there's no way, and that shouldn't deter anybody anyway. But it's
sounds scary though.
It is hard. Thinking about 3 years or 7 years of school hauls on one test. Here's the thing: if you don't pass a bar in one state, go to another one. They get easier sometimes. I mean, you can go anywhere else and do it if you go to the right schools. And I know one of my former mock trial students finally got admitted in Oregon, used that to get admitted in Washington, then finally passed the California bar. I mean, after like 4 years.
Where there's a will, there's a way.
That's exactly it. I mean, I have a friend of mine who is a district attorney over in Kings County who took the bar 5 times. I would have probably blown my brains out. At least that's what it feels like. But he took it 5 times to pass the California bar. And I mean, he was like, I just was determined to pass. And he did. So,
That's great. Before Chris scares everyone away from California, I will say the bar has gotten progressively easier over the years. Like Chris said earlier, it is not 3 days anymore. It's now 2 days in California. And then also this July, they just reduced the cutoff that you have to score above to pass. So we haven't gotten results from the July administration because it happened in October. But once it's come out, I think people are expecting to see higher scores. So, I mean, California has been the holdout. California, I think it's well known as like the hardest bar exam. It has a reputation for being that way. I think people are realizing that the bar exam has actually been preventing good lawyers from becoming licensed as good lawyers. And it's not actually a good indicator of whether or not you are a good lawyer. And so people are really working hard, I think, to lower that standard because it's a little bit arbitrary right now. It's not very helpful for the profession.
Yeah, you really want to keep as much of a healthy perspective about the bar exam in particular as you can. You know, some incredible people weren't able to pass the bar the first time, and that didn't change just how incredible they were. Michelle Obama failed the bar exam. FDR failed the bar exam. Hillary Clinton failed the bar exam. These are all incredibly accomplished people. I don't have to defend them. But that's just the thing. Like, you know, these tests, you know, they test a very limited set of skills, which may or may not be arbitrary. I tend to think that they're arbitrary. But, you know, they don't define how great of a student you are. They don't define how great of a lawyer you will be. It's just another barrier you have to overcome. And, you know, trust me, you will overcome, however that may be.
So what I'd like to do at this point is I'm going to have Crystal ask one last question, and then I'd like to open up everything to the Q&A. So our students out there that are listening, you want to start typing your questions in the Q&A, we'll start getting those lined up. But Crystal, why don't you go ahead with your last question?
Okay, our last question is for Alexia. What is the hardest thing about the FBI?
Do we lose connection again?
is it that people might shoot at you?
Alexia, are you there?
Problem. Yeah, can you hear me or no?
Yes, now I can. Yes, you're good.
Okay, good. I suppose there's a few things that make it challenging, but honestly, one of the harder things is that for a long time, agents have not been able to choose where they live. And I think, so basically when you apply to the FBI, you go to Quantico, Virginia for your training, and you're there for about 5 to 6 months. And on week 14, you open up an envelope in front of your class and it says where your first office assignment is. And so I opened up my envelope and it said Albany, New York. And I honestly didn't even know where Albany, New York was on the map. So I think they're trying to get a little bit better about it. And I think they're starting to recognize that we don't have the historic type of agent that we used to have, meaning it's not just the man is the agent and he has a stay-at-home wife who can move anywhere that he goes. You have 2 working parents, you have you have kids that you're pulling away from where they're from. It's getting harder for people to raise children without having family around. There are ways to move around in the Bureau, but it's a huge sacrifice. And there are some offices where you can get on that waiting list and it will take you over 20 years to get to the location you're trying to go to. So for instance, I'm from Chicago. I think I'm number 200 on the list right now, and it's probably not going to happen for me. And it gets hard when, you know, your parents start to get ill, or you have challenges in life and you'd like to be in a certain place. So I think that's probably the biggest sacrifice that we make as agents. You know, not to mention that it can be a very challenging job in terms of work-life balance at times. I think in general, it looks very much like other government jobs where we have pretty normal hours, but when something goes wrong, we can suddenly have to be somewhere and not come home for a couple weeks and work insane hours. I was in Albany when the Boston Marathon bombing happened, and I was on the evidence response team. It's a specialized team where we help at crime scenes. And I was deployed to the Boston site with an hour warning, and I didn't come home for 10 days, and I was working, 16-hour days, and it was just, it's hard. But those are also the moments that make the job worth it, I'll be totally honest. So yeah, there's some challenges with, I think, your ability to balance this job and life.
Wow, that's incredible. And I wouldn't have realized that without your information here. I'm so curious. I mean, you're talking that you're going up and you're spending hours and hours, or weeks taking care of a case and may not see your family. In terms of work hours, just a quick shout out. Chris, what are your work hours typically?
Our office is open from 8:30 to 5 every day, Monday through Friday. I work when I have to. I'm a private attorney. I went on vacation for a week, for 10 days. I found out the day before I was going on vacation that I had a whole bunch of reports that I was about 2 or 3 months behind on for my conflict cases that needed to be in by the middle of last week. So yeah, I was up late 3 nights in a row, Sunday through Monday in Texas, logging into my computer at work and finishing my reports. I work, if I don't work, I don't get paid. So I work weekends. I'm here right now. It's 7:10. My family's at home. My wife knows where I am. But I mean, generally I work regular hours, but sometimes you have to work late. Sometimes you have to work on the weekends. But self-employed, I don't punch a clock. If I don't have anything I have to do, and I feel like going home at 1 o'clock and taking a nap, I can do that because I'm the boss. Now, I know that at Jones Day, they can't let you do that unless you can sneak them under your desk, so a nap under there. So yeah, I mean, as far as I have two schools of thought when it comes to private attorneys like me. I need to work hard enough to earn the money to live the way I want to live. Or as long as there are hours in the day, I can make more money. And the second one will probably kill you. You'll make a lot of money, but you're going to die of a heart attack the minute you decide you're going to retire, if not before. So I work as hard as, I have a good life. And my wife's has a good job. She's a city manager. So I can't complain about that. So.
Curtis, how about you? What's your typical work day look like?
Yeah, love my job at the ACLU. I was very fortunate. Normally, more often than not, it's a 9-to-5 job, occasional variations therein, you might stay an extra hour or something like that. Maybe if you have a filing that's due, you might have to have a late night here or there. It really wasn't until around March and April, when COVID started happening, that things just really became a gauntlet. We were filing, so the ACLU, national, just variety of different offices and projects. We started conducting a lot of cases in immigration detention, recognizing that amidst the COVID pandemic, it was a particularly dangerous and inhumane place to be, immigration detention centers. And they were at a particular risk of contracting COVID and facing serious illness or death. So we had cases going on all over the country. I worked most closely on a couple of cases in New Mexico, and it was a very exhilarating time, but it also ceased to be a 9-to-5 job. And it was really just a 2 or 3 month long gauntlet until those cases started to peter down. So it's really context specific, like when, it's 9-to-5 until the situation demands otherwise. So, yeah.
Very good. And Bailey with Big Law, first year associate, what's a typical work day?
The expectation is that in a year you will meet at least 2,000 billable hours. A billable hour is something that your client pays you to do. So my time copying pages or printing things out or getting lunch, those are not billable hours. So what is usually a 9 to 5 looks more like an 8 to 9 on a good day, minimum 40 billable hours a week, but it's very much dependent on what's happening. And some weeks there's not a lot going on. I can't meet that. So I know I'm going to have to be working twice as hard next week. I do cybersecurity. A lot of times there are deadlines set by state laws that you have to notify people within 2 weeks. And in that time you have to do a forensic investigation and figure out what states are affected and what the laws are and what they say you have to say and write all that and get it out to the consumer and contract with an agency who's going to get it out to the consumer for you. Those are usually like 18 to 20 hour days for 2 weeks straight. And in big law, I am very much, working whatever case I'm told. So most recently I had a client who is based in San Francisco. That was where the company was based. I live in Boston. I got out of bed at 1 a.m. to get on a meeting and work because that's what was expected of me. It is definitely a very difficult life to live at times. And it definitely, I think, shows a lot of burnout in big law in particular, that people tend to be there for a couple of years and then move on to a different aspect of law or a different profession altogether. And then there's some people who stick it out and they go all the way up the chain of command until they make partner. This works for me right now. I'm young. I am in my mid-20s. My fiance is a PhD student. He lives in his lab all day long. So there's not a lot that I'm missing out on at home all the time. But if I were older and maybe if I had kids or if my fiance was home more often, like that would feel like a real sacrifice to be missing out on that more. And even still, it has been a sacrifice at times. Like my pro bono work, for example, one of my big cases last year was 2 days after Christmas. And so the week before Christmas, I worked 16-hour days all leading up. Christmas Day, I took half a day off to enjoy Christmas and then got on a plane to Texas that night to go prep my case and show up at the courthouse in San Antonio. And that's what the expectation is. And I signed up for this job and I went into this job knowing what that expectation is, but it is very difficult. The work-life balance does not exist. And that is the expectation that is set for you. And if you don't like it, then they show you the door. So that's what big law looks like a lot of times.
So I think we're coming to about the end of our time tonight. And before I thank everyone, I want to turn to Crystal. Crystal, you represent the students. Are there any questions that you have for our
No, I think a lot of information was covered. A lot of the questions I had now that I am applying to colleges have been answered, and it really has helped me, like all the information that was given has helped me build a better understanding of what I want to do, what kind of law, because I do want to be a lawyer, and I know that I hope I will be a lawyer, but it gives me a better understanding of the different types of laws, which is something that is usually not covered for students when we have guest speakers. And I think this presentation was really good to cover different aspects of laws and different things you can do with the law degree. So as of right now, I do not have any questions, and I really appreciate all the information that you guys were able to share.
Crystal, you did a great job too. To our panelists tonight, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. Oh, Chris, go.
One last thing Crystal just reminded me. As a student, when you go to college, major in what you want, what you're interested in, where you're going to get good grades in, because your grades are going to get you into law school, your grades in your LSAT or whatever. But while you're in college, intern in a law office, get a job in a law office, work with lawyers. I know a lot of people that I went to law school and they realize lawyers are a-holes. At least some of them are. And I didn't like that. I'm one of my first mock trial students. She was dead set on, helping battered women and running a law project. She was going to change the world. She got an internship down in San Diego working for a woman that she wanted to be. And after a couple of months, she goes, I don't like her life. She doesn't like her life. She is not a lawyer. She is not going to be a lawyer. She went on to something else. And you need to test the waters before you do it, because it's not for everybody. It's like medical school. It's not for everybody. You know, if you want to be a lawyer, work in law, you love it, good for you. You don't. I worked in a law office for 7.5 years before I graduated law school. And the entire time I worked there reinforced the fact that I wanted to be a lawyer. I worked for good, competent, smart, nice lawyers. And I got to meet a lot of other lawyers. And I just tell you, do that. There was a question, the hardest thing about being a lawyer. I mean, lawyers don't like losing. You know, you want to advocate, but you got to know whether you're going to lose or not. But just one thing I tell people, everybody talks about lawyers. Lawyers like to argue. No, lawyers do not like to argue. Lawyers like to be right. That's it.
Can I add one last thing too? No,
Sure.
we're being late. Something that I see a lot of lawyers, especially young lawyers, do, especially everybody that comes in wanting to change the world, is they're great at advocating for other people, and they will just work themselves to death to advocate for other people, and they will go into battle. They are fierce, they're raging, like they're ready to fight and win for this client because they know this client needs their help. And these lawyers are terrible at advocating for themselves. And I think law is very difficult as a profession. I think that I know that it has a high rate of people struggling with mental health concerns and mental illness, depression, anxiety, other mental health concerns, substance abuse, alcoholism. It's all a huge part of the legal profession. And there are things you can do to help yourself. And it starts for you now. It starts for you in high school. Like if you are having trouble in your class with a teacher, if you're having trouble with another student, if you're having trouble like getting access to the resources you need to apply for colleges, to have the information that you need to succeed, then you have to be your own best advocate first. You have to reach out. You have to start asking questions. You have to realize that like you do deserve to have access to these things, access to these resources and the same opportunities that other people do. And if you're not getting those, then you have to go be the one to fight for yourself, because some people are lucky and they have someone else that's going to do that for them, but a lot of people don't. And when you get into college, if you are the kind of person who has your parents standing up for you, that's great. But when you're in college, if your parents call the office, they're going to say, sorry, we can't talk about your student with you. And they're going to hang up on them. So you have to be the one that is willing to go in and take advantage of office hours and take advantage of the resources for your mental and physical health and overall well-being. Speaking personally, like I managed to get through high school, I managed to get through college. I was a pretty decent student, but I took a lot of shortcuts. I took a lot of ways to make things faster. I thought I was just a procrastinator. I got to law school and I did terribly. I did terribly my first semester. And it turns out that a lot of the times where I've been struggling thinking like, well, this is just how life is. I had ADHD and I was undiagnosed, and getting a diagnosis and getting treatment for that really made a huge difference in my quality of life. And this is something that's not just going to help you in your professional life and your academic life, but in your personal life. Learn to set boundaries, learn to ask for what you need, learn to communicate with other people. There's not going to be someone that's always going to do that for you. So if you can learn those skills now, they're hard, they're difficult, they're uncomfortable, but it is going to make your life so much better. And you have to look out for yourself first. It's like being on an airplane. You have to put your mask on before you can put someone else's on for them. So if you want to be a good attorney, take care of yourself first.
Thank you. Well, I think we are out of time at this point. I want to thank our panelists for taking so much time out of their day today and really sharing a great depth of knowledge to our students. And we really, really appreciate you. Thank you very much. Chris, Curtis, Bailey, Alexa, thank you very much. And Crystal, you did an amazing job. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and say good night to everyone. And thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you. Good night.
Night.
Thank you.